Manager, Sophie Young. So Sophie, take it away.
Great. Good morning, everyone. We are really excited for this opportunity to share the Round 4 Transformative Climate Communities Guidelines and Application with you all. After over 2 years, I know a lot of you have been following our program, and this last year's climate budget recognized the powerful impact of this program in being able to provide the resources to your communities to drive the change that you want to see by funding us for $420 million over the next 3 years. So we are excited to offer this first round in that next 3-year process. So we've been really inspired by all of the activities that have gone on in our TCC communities to date since the first grants were executed in 2019 in ways that were intended by the original legislation and environmental justice community, and also in a lot of surprising ways as well, due to the creativity of the local leaders that we're trying to support. It has been and continues to be a journey, and we're really happy to provide this opportunity to more community leaders over the next 3 years in order to build the climate resilience and the social resilience for your community visions that just need those extra resources to make them happen. So my very creative and thoughtful teammates here have also revamped our previously 45-minute slide deck into a more interactive format today for this computer world that we're living in now. And so thanks to them for their good work, and also for some TCC grantees here who will be sharing their experiences, and also the technical assistance providers and state partners for sharing resources, and then all of you for your time. So we're really looking forward to our conversations today online, and as the world opens up, we look forward to continuing them in person. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to our team.
Great, thank you, Sophie. So before we begin, a couple of housekeeping items. So the session will be recorded and will be posted on the TCC website. If you have any tech issues, you can message Sarah Newsham, our colleague Sarah Newsham, in the chat. And then also feel free to ask any questions as they come up, post them in the chat. We can either answer them via real time at the end of the session, or if we run out of time, we can always get back to them via email. So having gone over that, let's do a quick the agenda. Briefly, we'll discuss the program overview, goals, and principles, as well as the important deadlines for the application process. We also have TA provider on the call who will also present an overview of the application TA provided for round 4. And then towards the end, we'll have the opportunity to hear from past grantees during this presentation, who in the breakout sessions can share some of their experiences as well as answer any questions that you may have for them. So next slide, please. So before we begin, we will give a brief background and overview of the TCC programs and goals. But before that, we'll talk about the California Strategic Growth Council. So SGC is a cabinet level committee tasked with coordinating state agency activities aimed at supporting the planning and development of sustainable communities. The mission of the council is to coordinate and work collaboratively with public agencies, communities, and stakeholders to achieve sustainability, equity, economic prosperity, and quality of life for all Californians. The California Strategic Growth Council is also committed to achieving racial equity in which all people of California can live in healthy, thriving, and resilient communities, regardless of race. Next slide. So the TCC program was created through legislation to fund community-led climate resilient development and infrastructure plans that provide multiple benefits, as we'll talk to in this presentation. The program vision for transformation is centered on a place-based approach with a focus on funding of neighborhood plans in the most disadvantaged communities in the state. Then we'd also like to take a moment to recognize that Strategic Growth Council recognizes the term disadvantaged, overlooks the many assets and existing efforts in communities, and uses the term from the California Environmental Protection Agency that defines disadvantaged communities as census tracts with high pollution and socioeconomic burdens. Next slide, please. So Strategic Growth Council administers the TCC program in partnership with the California Department of Conservation, who's also on this call. TCC funds community-driven proposals and is structured to provide existing residents and stakeholders with the tools and resources to drive change. TCC makes significant investments to support the deployment of multiple integrated climate strategies and projects carried out through strong partnerships at the local level and with the state. And then to date, the program has invested over $230 million in 26 communities, with implementation grants ranging between 10 and 66 million, and then planning grants between 100 and 200,000. Next slide. So here, the TCC implementation grants. SGC administers implementation and planning grants. For round 4, there are 3 awards for $35 million each. Again, funding project proposals that include multiple coordinated projects aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions and achieving community benefits. And then typically these are 5-year project completion periods, followed by a one year of performance and outcome evaluation. And then as far as planning grants, there are 4 awards for round 4 at $300,000 each, supporting planning activities in disadvantaged communities, which we hope will prepare communities for future TCC implementation grants or other resilience implementation funding. And these are typically a 2-year grant term with an option to extend on a case-by-case basis. The next couple of slides here will show a couple of images of the implementation grants across the state since 2018, again with grants ranging between 10 and 66.5 million. And the total number of projects within these awarded sites ranging between 10 to 20. And then noting also that all of the round 3 implementation grantees you see here were also former planning grantees. And then on the right, we have some images of the work that's been done to date from some of our implementation grant sites. Next slide, thank you. And then here, the last image that I'll show here is the map of the planning grants to date. And this is in rural and urban areas for around 100, as we said, to $200,000. And then on the right, you see an image from a historic participatory budgeting process in Fresno. Fresno's a round 1 implementation grantee. This shows an image that has a powerful planning process that resulted in community prioritized projects. We encourage you to visit the TCC website with resources, which has full summaries of all previous implementation and planning grantees with links to their project sites for further samples. So now that we've given a quick, brief background on the program, I will hand the presentation over to Brian from the Department of Conservation. Brian?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here with us. It's really nice to see a lot of your faces and names, some new and some familiar. So today you're going to hear a lot of detailed information. TCC, as many of you know, is a complicated program, unusually complicated, and our application can be kind of daunting, and we're going to do our best to orient you to the requirements and resources we have available. But because of what Jerry just explained, because of the heart of the program, we really want to take a step back first and talk about what we're trying to do here, because it does inform the rest of the work. So here's what the program's about. Next slide, please. So this is really it for us, right? And Jerry said this as well. Fundamentally, TCC is about people, projects, and place. We're asking you to come together and share your model with us for what you need in your community. And so the rest of it, the strategies and thresholds and requirements, all kind of follow from this principle. And we come back to this throughout the work in implementation and in the application review. We really want to know what you need and work from there. So the first part of that, right, is the community. Applicants form partnerships and work with residents, leaders, and organizations to develop their community vision for what they think their community should look like. That vision informs the rest of the program, how projects are selected, and how the work is conducted for the life of the grant. Participants select projects that build resilience and improve livelihoods in ways that are meaningful to the people of the community. Every grant includes multiple projects within the project area, and the work of those projects gets integrated into each other to implement that vision. There's a lot of different project types and strategies, and each has their own requirements and their own details, but they're also flexible. So each strategy includes multiple types of projects and activities that can be funded under it and multiple ways to accomplish that work. We really want to hear what you have to say. And if you have a vision and a strategy, the program staff, us, and our TA partners are here to work with you to try and make it work and understand how it fits with our program. Finally, the program has 6 transformative elements that are included in each proposal and are really entrenched into all the other work that's conducted under the program. These elements are really meant to further the transformative potential of the investments made and to ensure that meaningful benefits are reaching existing residents and stakeholders. So the 3 you see here, community engagement, workforce development, and displacement avoidance are sort of pretty significant investments, pretty significant components of the program. And we ask every grantee, or every grantee to pursue community engagement and participation throughout the rest of the work. The next 3 transformative elements are a little bit more in the background, but they still inform everything else we do. Climate adaptation and resilience, pretty naturally, it's incorporated into all of the projects that are conducted in the program, and overall community vision. Data collection and indicator tracking really helps us understand what's happening in the program and how we can apply lessons learned and better support your projects. And the leverage funding commitments are pretty significant, but they're also more open-ended than many other programs. And what we found is that the investments made in the community are really able to catalyze partnerships and help those partners bring in additional resources that they couldn't have before those partnerships existed. We've had some really amazing stories come out of what our partners have built together, and then the connections they've made and outreach they've done to other programs in order to bring more investments to their community. And what we see when you take those things together, I think, is that our projects are really special. It's not a program where you have 5 or 10 or 15 projects that are all on their own, that are just kind of in a bucket and being funded. Projects get community input, they're local and accessible, they're integrated with infrastructure and each other, and they really do have these catalytic properties. And so that's finally it. That's where I'm going to leave you. What we see and what we think this program does is create a common vision, integrated projects, lasting partnerships, and real impact. We're really kind of amazed and proud of the work our grantees are doing, and we're excited to hear what you have to offer. So I can't really overstate how much we are invested in these principles. I know we've already said it, but everything else you hear today and everything our grantees can tell you is that we continually come back to these questions of community vision, to projects, to integration, to need throughout the life of the grant, as problems arise or as changes occur. So I really want you, as you go through the rest of this, to feel empowered and to know that we want to ask you, like, to advocate for your vision. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. So next we'll take a look at the application overview and timeline. In this section, we will describe eligibility requirements for applicants and project or planning areas, walk through the key application components and requirements, and provide an overview of the application timeline, as well as technical assistance opportunities. So who is eligible to apply? Applications must include a minimum of 2 co-applicants, including a public agency as a co-applicant. As described before, a core component of the program is the collaborative stakeholder structure. Thus, a range of entities are eligible, but no single entity on their own will be competitive. Eligible applicants include, but are not limited to, the ones on this slide. And the lead applicant must be one that demonstrates sufficient financial and administrative capacity to administer the grants. As discussed before, TCC is a place-based program with investments concentrated in a single neighborhood. So applicants must define a project or planning area that is contiguous and covers less than 5 square miles. You can see here the requirements for areas that are located in incorporated areas or federally recognized tribal territories. At least 51% of the area must be within census tracts designated as disadvantaged per Cal EPA's Cal Enviro screen, with scores amongst the top 25% of version 3.0 or 4.0, or conversely be located within federally recognized tribal boundaries. And the remaining 49% or less of the project area must meet those same requirements or be a low-income community per Assembly Bill 1550. In this new round, disadvantaged unincorporated communities are now also eligible for the TCC grants. Here we describe eligibility criteria for unincorporated communities, which differs slightly from the criteria seen on the previous slide. The same requirements exist, which is that 51% of the project or planning area is disadvantaged and 49% of the area is disadvantaged or low income, but the method for determining whether a community is disadvantaged differs. Over the past 2 years, TCC program staff have developed an investment framework to address the lack of data representation and basic infrastructure access for disadvantaged unincorporated communities. And there are 4 methods to determine eligibility in unincorporated areas. And a community only needs to meet any one of these 4 criteria to be designated as disadvantaged unincorporated. The first is being located within a disadvantaged census tract per Cal Enviro screen, again within the top 25%, and be designated as disadvantaged unincorporated community by the local agency formation commission, LAFCO. Second option, the project or planning area is an eligible location per the TCC mapping tool, which utilizes 3 layers, areas with in Cal Enviro screen scores in the top 25%, census block groups designated as hard to count per the California Hard to Count Index, and clusters of unincorporated parcels at a density of at least 250 parcels per square mile. There will be more information on this in the TCC mapping tool on the next slide. The third option is that the project area is within the planning area of a previous TCC planning grant. And the final option is to self-identify as a disadvantaged unincorporated community and justify that designation with local data that identifies population characteristics and density at a neighborhood level. Next slide. So we've updated the TCC mapping tool to combine the data layers that we discussed and that we see here with TCC program requirements into one tool to help communities determine their eligibility. We have also a story map and 13-minute video tutorial posted on our website. The link is on the slide, each of which walk through how to use the tool. And technical assistance providers will also work with grantees to identify an eligible area. And again, we want to highlight that all federally recognized tribal territories are eligible, and all disadvantaged unincorporated communities may be eligible if they are able to justify their designation with a neighborhood level assessment of population characteristics and density. Applicants will use our templates to submit a work plan, budget, and set of narrative responses for each project and plan. The partner organization responsible for leading each project or plan can take the lead on completing those portions of the application. Applicants will also submit readiness documentation and letters of support as required and based on the project type. And planning grant applications are much less intensive and includes a single budget, work plan, and narrative questions. TCC program staff will first evaluate implementation grant proposals using the program thresholds found in the application. These thresholds are based on eligibility and TCC program requirements. For example, a partnership agreement is required for the collaborative stakeholder structure. And applicants need to select at least 3 strategies and propose a minimum of 3 projects. These 3 proposed projects must be quantifiable and ready for implementation, as well as comprise of at least 50% of the requested grant funds. And as a reminder, and as you can find in the guidelines, quantifiable means that the California Air Resources Board has a methodology for quantifying greenhouse gas emissions for that type of activity. And ready means that projects meet requirements for CEQA, site control, and permitting. Next, I'll hand it off to Bo from our team to go over policy priorities.
Great, thank you so much, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. I'm a senior project analyst with the TCC team, and I'm going to be going over a few of the TCC policy priorities. So in round 4, we want to make sure that that you all understand like some of the changes that impact eligibility and evaluation. Some of them are required, and some involve incentive points. So applicants must demonstrate that residents in the proposed TCC project area have existing access or develop plans for basic water supply and wastewater services, as well as transit connectivity to regional service hubs and major job centers throughout affordable, clean transportation projects. Applicants can allocate up to 10% of TCC grant funds towards meeting the water and wastewater requirement and can meet their other requirements through TCC funded projects. TA providers will support applicants in meeting these requirements through their proposed projects. Secondly, applicants must demonstrate that residents in the proposed TCC project area have existing access or develop, applicants must demonstrate that TCC proposals are consistent with all relevant land use plans, including climate action plans, zoning, building density requirements, design guidelines, and applicable goals, policies, and programs. This consistency can be demonstrated by submitting a letter from the local jurisdiction's planning department or public works department describing the proposed TCC project's consistency with all relevant plans. Thirdly, applicants from cities and planned high-speed rail stations along the initial Silicon Valley to Central Valley line must include in the TCC project area multimodal connectivity to the high-speed rail station area. And if there are any proposed affordable and mixed income housing, that connectivity and accessibility to the high-speed rail station area should be included as well. There are 2 additional policy incentives for pro-housing and air pollution reduction and mitigation, which can earn applicants an additional 5 points each. TCC will provide incentives to applicants that propose actions or include existing meaningful efforts to reduce localized point sources of pollution in their TCC project areas and jurisdiction. And TCC is required by legislation to provide incentive points to applicants in jurisdictions that receive the Department of Housing and Community Development's pro-housing designation, which incentivizes policies that would facilitate sustainable housing production and the reduction of vehicle miles traveled. Any jurisdiction can earn these points. For the pro-housing incentive, want to let you all know that tribal communities will automatically get full points, and the Department of Housing and Community Development's pro-housing designation can earn any jurisdiction these points. Additionally, there are example policies for both incentives listed in the guidelines appendices. A member of the Housing and Community Development unit will be coming to speak shortly on this program in more detail. Next slide, please. Thank you. With respect to the scoring criteria, each applicant will be evaluated based on its vision and objectives, demonstrated capacity to implement the proposal, and transformative elements. Planning grants will also be evaluated on the projects proposed and the pro-housing policy incentive. The application thresholds and full scoring criteria are listed in the round 4 guidelines. And this slide gives you a general idea of what the point system looks like. Next slide, please. With respect to the application timeline, all implementation grant applicants are required to receive free third-party technical assistance to ensure that questions are answered consistently, feedback is given equitably, and greenhouse gas estimates are completed uniformly. Requests for application technical assistance may be submitted up until March 25th. After March 25th, requests for technical assistance will only be accepted if there is space. So I want to draw your attention to this March 25th deadline. Expanded technical assistance is available for disadvantaged unincorporated communities and tribal communities, which can extend beyond the March 25th deadline and cover additional topics. We are holding additional workshops next week for these groups. And if this affects you or you have further questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Third-party technical assistance will also be provided to planning grant applicants from tribal communities and disadvantaged and incorporated communities in this round to support our efforts to expand access to those communities. For tribal and disadvantaged and incorporated community folks, we encourage you to submit the TA survey as soon as you know you're interested in applying for either type of grant to ensure that the TA team has the capacity to provide you with sufficient support. There's no specific deadline for the survey, and we will work with you to provide the support we can at any point in the timeline. For planning grant applicants who are not eligible for third-party TA, TCC staff will be available to answer questions throughout the application process. All application grant applicants will submit a pre-proposal by April 22nd to help the applicant TA providers and SGC assess whether applicants are on track to meet the threshold requirements by the application deadline and to identify areas where additional support is needed. The pre-proposal will not influence application evaluation. For those not eligible for planning grant technical assistance, a simple planning grant interest survey is due May 16th. The final application submission deadline is July 1st, 2022, and round 4 TCC awards will be adopted by the council on October 2022. So now I'd like to hand it off to our colleague who will be covering some of the pro-housing designation.
That's right. Thank you, Bo. So we have Chelsea Lee here from HCD who will cover pro-housing. So Chelsea, welcome to the conversation. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Gerard. Am I able to share my screen?
You should be able to, yes.
Okay, great. Give me 1 second. And are you all able to see my screen now? With the slides?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. Let's see here.
Can I confirm that with
How about now?
Oh, there we go. Yep, we can see it now.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks, everyone, for having me today. I'm happy to be here today to talk a little bit about the Pro-Housing Designation Program and its linkages to TCC. My name is Chelsea Lee. I'm the project manager for the Pro-Housing Designation Program. And just here to very quickly share out a little bit about what we're doing here at HCD with the program. So in terms of program overview, basically the program originated from AB 101 or the 2019 to 2020 Budget Act. We were tasked with the legislature to really reward jurisdictions who are essentially going above and beyond in terms of accelerating housing production and preserving affordable housing stock and aligning, policies and programs with a variety of compatible housing goals. So that would entail a lot of TCC priorities as well in terms of, making sure that we have holistic planning in terms of climate change, infrastructure projects, capital improvements, things like that. And so essentially, obviously we have our partnership with the TCC folks. Pro-housing designation can be conferred to a jurisdiction. And really, once they obtain that designation from us, applicants are able to gain a very competitive edge in terms of funding or application processing or priority when they apply to a variety of these programs, including the TCC grant. So we're really excited to be a part of this partnership with TCC. We just expanded to include the Transit and Intercity Rail and Capital Program, TIRCIP, and potentially a lot more funding sources coming soon. I think Gerard and Bo spoke on this just now, but obviously, the principles of pro-housing, we think very closely align with the objectives of TCC, and that's why you see that close integration there. pro-housing is really, again, to recognize jurisdictions that are, increasing their development capacity, variety, or streamlining in policies and zoning processes, to ensure planning is consistent, ultimately with state priorities, to promote equitable communities and affirmatively further fair housing, collaborating with one another and with regional partners to align policies and programs, and of course to ensure that folks are implementing relevant housing statutes and complying with state housing law. Pro-housing is an over-the-counter process. So applicants that are interested in applying for designation are able to access our webpage here with all of the application materials that you will need. Once you submit an application to HCD, we essentially have 60 days to review that application, provide feedback. That typically happens in a consultation call with us, and we will, go over the application, be available for questions, and just generally be a sounding board to applicants in terms of the things they're thinking about counting for pro-housing consideration. And applications are approved on a rolling basis. So there's no kind of deadline to submit an application. We just, continuously process them over the counter indefinitely. And in terms of technical assistance, we've already, been knee deep in some of this. We have provided several webinars and outreach to, the various council of governments. We also do specialized workshops. We've been able to do some of those in person to really help applicants understand the different components of the application and how to, kind of score their policies. And so we've definitely done some of that, for example, in the Coachella Valley, just running through the application line item by line item, and folks have found that really helpful. So that's definitely an option that is also on the table. We're also providing direct assistance to applicants in terms of office hours. So, cities and counties are able to schedule one-on-ones with us in our team and go through the application as well before they submit their application officially. If any of this is of interest to folks and they're interested in applying for the program, you are welcome to let us know at prohousingpolicies@hcd.ca.gov. We're also conducting technical assistance through that inbox, so we're able to answer any questions that you may have on the application or the process. Like I said, all of our materials are available on our website, and please follow us on Twitter for the latest updates on pro-housing. And thank you so much. And I'm happy to answer any questions at a later time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea. Appreciate that. So we will pop the presentation back on our screen here. And while we do that, just want to let you all know that we've in the chat dropped a link, a shortened link just recently to the application TA survey. It's the bit.ly. So flagging that, and then transitioning to application TA, we'll toss it over to Riley O'Brien, who's here to talk about application TA. Riley.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Gerard. I'd actually like to pass it over to my colleague, Richard France, who some of you may recognize from previous rounds of the TCC Technical Assistance Program.
Thanks, Riley. Hi, folks. Richard France. I'm a principal at Estelano Advisors and part of the technical assistance team that's supported by SGC. So thank you all for joining us today. Riley's really going to lead us through the presentation on the types of technical assistance that you can expect from our team. But just wanted to say hi, to see some familiar faces, and welcome to the program. Hopefully we'll be able to get to know each of you and your projects a little bit better, but we're here as a resource and have assembled a cohort of experts in different subject areas. So we're really looking forward to diving in, learning more about your projects, and offering up assistance as we walk through this often complicated and very important program. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Riley to get into the specifics.
Thank you, Richard. And just to introduce myself, my name is Riley O'Brien. I'm a senior analyst with Estolano Advisors. And you may recognize Estolano Advisors as the lead technical assistance provider from the first 3 rounds of TCC. So we're really excited to be back for round 4. And as you can see on this slide, there are a variety of services that we're able to provide, including but not limited to, reviewing project readiness, helping coordinate among your applicant team, and helping to review your budget, a variety of other services that we can go into more detail soon. But the main thing we want to highlight right now is that, as other folks have mentioned, all implementation grant applicants for TCC are required to work with our team. And that is to ensure consistency across the board. So if you are interested in a TCC implementation grant, you will need to complete this TA interest survey in the chat and available on the TCC website within 2 weeks. And so moving on to the next slide, we will reiterate that some planning grant applicants are also eligible to work with us. Specifically, those are tribal communities and disadvantaged unincorporated communities, as SGC refers to certain folks. And if you are in an unincorporated community, if you work for a county government or otherwise fit that designation as a local stakeholder, if you're not sure if you qualify, I know they showed the mapping tool briefly earlier. Fill out the survey. It's the same deadline and it's the same exact survey. It will direct you where to go, and we can work with you to determine your eligibility. But moving on to the next slide, I did want to also just give an overview of our team, because it's not just Estolano Advisors, it's actually a variety of experts across the board who are experienced in various communities and various subjects related to TCC and to California. So those include, at the top here, Estolano Advisors Local Government Commission, which actually recently changed their name to CivicWell. So I know there's some CivicWell reps on the call right now. So if you recognize Local Government Commission, they are now CivicWell, but it's the same, a lot of the same folks, same group helping out. And then we also have ARUP as a lead technical assistance provider. The lead TA providers, we will pair you with one of these organizations to really be the main point of contact and someone you can work with very closely as the application period progresses. But we also have a deep bench of experts on various subject areas, and those actually include some of the lead TA provider team members as well. So our firm, Estolano Advisors, we've done a lot of work on workforce development related to climate mitigation and sustainability and equity. So we will also help various applicants with workforce development components. Similarly, ARUP has a team of a lot of transportation engineers and sustainability experts that can advise folks on transportation and climate infrastructure. And then we have other subject matter experts that will be supporting various applicants, including enterprise community partners, supporting folks on components related to housing, especially in urban areas, as we also have the California Coalition for Rural Housing with specific expertise in housing in rural communities in California. CDRG, the Community Development Resources Group, is actually on the line today to discuss greenhouse gas emission quantification. So we will introduce them shortly. We have the National Indian Justice Center, which has expertise on governance and coordination and administration with Native American communities throughout California. California Relief with expertise on urban greening and forestry, and then Farallon Strategies with expertise on climate policy. And so moving on to the next slide, we just wanted to give a bit of a deeper dive into the technical assistance process. So again, step one is to respond to the TA survey. Again, within 2 weeks, if at all possible, please let us know. You can let SGC staff know if this timeline is unrealistic or a huge challenge to you, we can be a little bit flexible, but we really want to get this process started early. And once you fill out that survey, our staff will reach out within about 3 business days to schedule a quick screening call, which is a chance for us to, discuss in real time these survey responses, your eligibility as an applicant, as well as the eligibility of your proposed projects, and just what type of technical assistance that you may need. And then moving on to the next slide, this is when the fun really begins. We will schedule a longer kickoff call to get more into the weeds of your application and get more specific about timeline, about when and how you'd like to check in. Do you want to do longer email check-ins, phone calls, Zoom calls, and so on? And then we can actually move forward from the kickoff call with a suite of TA services that we'll be able to provide based on your needs as an applicant. So moving on to the next slide, I think just to give a bit more insight into what we will be assisting folks with. I mentioned a little bit earlier in terms of application review and making sure that your partnerships and everything is eligible. So that's one component. But of course, we also want to try to maximize the components of your application to make sure that they're doing the most they can to incorporate equity, incorporate sustainability, and we can help clarify items that are within the guidelines. We can help with mapping, GIS, geographic information systems mapping, as well as just kind of more generally mapping out what your projects might look like. And then, of course, greenhouse gas emission quantification, which we'll talk about a bit more shortly. Next slide, we describe what our work plan development looks like. So we have templates that we will be able to share with you to kind of start thinking more concretely about how we can assist you and what exactly you'd like our team to help with, and timelines for that and everything. But that is really meant for you, so it's for you to customize and to work with us to finalize. So the next slide, we have a bit more detail on the greenhouse gas emissions. So I'm thrilled to introduce Kevin from CDRG to discuss this.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. So I'm Kevin from Community Development Resource Group, and we are the GHG provider for the entire TCC process. So one thing that is different about TCC than other programs is we actually do the calculations with you. So we're going to work together. The purpose of this slide here is just to acknowledge that there are GHGs as part of the scoring for this. It's 20 points out of the 205 total points. We don't want to distract anybody from everything else that we have to talk about today. So just know that going forward, we create a customized work plan for your group as you move forward. So we help you as you go along with your GHG, the impact of the GHG reductions for the projects that you are considering. And we can help along the way to assess what the differences are between your projects and things like that. So we'll be right there with you the whole time. And that's it for today. So know that we'll be around. Look forward to working with all of you.
Still on mute, sorry. Thank you so much, Kevin. And just a couple more slides here to discuss our local technical assistance provider opportunities. So, our team has a lot of expertise throughout the state and through various communities throughout the state, but we recognize that, California is huge, and no one knows your community better than the folks that have been active in advocating and providing services in that community. So we have a great opportunity for community-based organizations to actually help our team and your team to help with facilitation, help with partnership development and review of application components as a local technical assistance provider. So going on to the next slide, what we are looking for in this opportunity would be a local nonprofit that has expertise in your area, that has experience working with the priority populations that TCC targets. So as others have mentioned, those facing pollution burden, facing social and economic barriers. And the way this works is in this initial, filling out the survey, filling out and having the screening call with us, you can recommend any local providers that you think might be a good fit. And in that case, we can work with SGC to select those TA providers based on funding and based on needs and qualifications. Then the next slide, the one really important aspect here is that the local TA provider cannot be a part of the application team. It would be a separate entity that maybe is not ready to commit to a multi-year grant, but is really excited about this opportunity, wants to help the process of applying and maybe learning more about TCC and about other statewide funding opportunities. So I would, invite any questions in the chat, of course. I see there are already some questions coming through, so that's great to see. And I'll pass it back over to SGC.
Great. Thank you, Riley. Thank you all for such great and pertinent information. Yeah, there are a lot of questions coming in the chat, and encourage you all to continue to ask those questions. And we have our staff hurriedly trying to respond as best as we can. And if we don't get to it, just go ahead and pop that question back in case it gets, so we can kind of keep it in this thread. So yeah, keep those coming. All right, with that said, we've gone over most of the agenda here. We'd like to introduce now 2 current grantees, both from rounds 1 and 2, who will give an overview of their TCC sites and projects. And then as a reminder, in the breakout rooms, we'll be able to talk, we'll break into 2 rooms and you'll be able to discuss and ask any questions to our guests today. So I'll toss it over to Katrina Kubicek from Watts Rising.
Thank you so much. And I'm really excited to be here and share a little bit about our program in Watts. I'm Katrina Kubicek. I am the Senior Project Manager for Watts Rising, and the primary partner is the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles, and we also partner with the Mayor's Office and our Council District 15. The next slide. So our Watts Rising Collaborative, we were a part of the round 1 applicants. We received our award in 2018. And with that award, we had leveraged over $160 million to fund additional community identified infrastructure projects. Also, more recently in 2020, HACLA also received $35 million from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Choice Neighborhood, to provide additional support to Watts Rising. So that's actually some of our TCC funded projects are continuing beyond the grant for TCC through funding with HUD. So we're excited about that to see some of that extension. We are a collaborative of Watts residents, over 40 organizations, the Housing Authority, the Mayor's Office, and Council District 15 for improving the quality of life in Watts. Watts, for those of you who are not familiar, is a community in Southeast Los Angeles. It is a relatively small community of about 40,000 residents, but it's also one of the most densely populated areas in Los Angeles. So it covers about a little over 2 square miles is the area that we are working with. And Watts, unfortunately, falls into the top quartile of many of the pollution burden, air pollutants, as well as asthma rates and low birth weights in the state. And some of our census tracts in Watts are actually in the top 5%. So we are a heavily burdened community as a result of decades of neglect. And Watts Rising is an opportunity to right that. We can go to the next slide. So our TCC grant funds 24 identified community infrastructure projects that fall into one of these hubs. So we have 5 hubs. The first one is expanding urban agriculture and access to healthy organic produce. So with that hub, we have 2 to 3 community gardens that we are working on that will provide fresh fruit and produce to the community, as well as a produce distribution that is done twice a month through picking up produce at the LA Produce Market and redistributing it to Watts residents, or composting for our community gardens. We also are working to provide more affordable, sustainable housing. That is through our Jordan Downs redevelopment plan. It's a part of the Housing Authority's long-term vision. So TCC funds are funding 81 affordable housing units within that development. We have low and no carbon transportation. So the Dash bus routes, which in LA are kind of local loops that go through different communities. The Watts bus route will be the first in the city that will be fully electrified. So we will have 10 electric buses that will be going through Watts, and the route was actually adjusted as well based on community feedback. And we also are including electric vehicle car sharing program and installing electric vehicle chargers in key locations throughout the community. We will be planting up to over 4,000 trees in Watts. It has one of the lowest tree canopies in the state. So we're planting trees, streets, churches, schools, residents. Our tree planting at this point is almost completed. So our tree planting partners are at this point for, really kind of moving more into a maintenance plan. So if you drive through Watts, you will see literally hundreds, if not thousands of trees that have been planted in the last year or so. And then lastly, we also have several projects that are focused on making streets safer for walking and riding. So we're including up to 5 miles of new bicycle lanes, improving sidewalks, signaling and crossing, and making streets safer for pedestrians. So as a result, some of the outcomes that we hope to achieve through this is, like I said, 5 miles of new bike lanes, over 300 tons of food waste that will be diverted, more than 25 blocks of pedestrian improvements. 3,000 is really more like 4,000 new trees that are planted. Energy efficient homes, I forgot to mention that. So we are installing electric retrofits in up to 289 homes, and 54 homes will be receiving new solar roofs. For more than 4 acres of urban agriculture, new commercial space, new affordable rental units as part of our Jordan Downs development, 2 new public parks, a cultural trail, and the car sharing and van pool that will be implemented this spring. So I think that is kind of a flavor for Watts Rising. My contact information is here, and I will be in the breakout sessions for folks that have some questions about our experiences implementing or just administering a grant.
Thank you, Katrina. Thank you for that. And now we will hear from a round 2 implementation grantee awardee representing the Pacoima Northeast San Fernando Valley area. I will pass the mic over to Jasmine Silva. Jasmine?
Thank you, Jerry. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jasmine Silva, and I serve as a network manager for the Green Together Coalition. We are a round 2 TCC grant recipient. Our project area is located in Pacoima and Sun Valley within Los Angeles. Our coalition consists of 10 funded projects, 3 of which include transformative elements and 6 leverage projects. 11 project partners are involved in this coalition, 7 of which are funded. The other 4 are leverage partners. So as you see here, this is our menu of projects being implemented. We have the pedestrian mobility improvements. Similar as the previous grantee shared, we are improving street sidewalks, making bike accessible lanes. Project 2, which is bringing in 14 electric buses to the project area. EV charging stations being installed, available for residents to charge electric vehicles. 175 solar installations within the project area. Park renovations occurring throughout David Gonzalez Park, and 2,000 trees being planted throughout the project area. As I mentioned before, we also have our transformative plans. So we have community engagement consisting of our primary lead applicant partner, Pacoima Beautiful, who is supporting all the projects in getting residents informed and involved in the planning of the Green Together Coalition. Our community engagement 2, which is a plan 2, which is to get multifamily homeowners interested in updating their systems or providing solar systems, and in return, the profits made through LEDWP would be to improve the dwelling. And our final transformative project, which is workforce development, working alongside GRID and Los Angeles Conservation Corp to gain the interest of at-youth residents within the project area to become trained in solar installation or street tree planting. And we're hoping that the individuals become certified and we can place them in the workforce. We also have leverage projects, which consists of cool roof retrofits, the Community Resilience Center, Bradley Green Alley renovation, the East San Fernando Valley Transit Corridor, Green Streets, and Fernangeles Park stormwater capture. We were awarded $22.5 million, and we are leveraging in $38.6 million. Next slide, please. So this is our project area throughout Pacoima and Sun Valley. It's approximately 5 square miles. I wanted to share a little bit about my experience with managing the grant. Unfortunately, I was not part of the application process. I came in as soon as the grant was executed and began in May of 2020. In conversations with partner leads and reviewing archives, I'm aware that the efforts took months of preparation in the area of community engagement. Selecting partners with the same vision was important. This took time to set norms and systems, for example, how to communicate, roles each one would play, and monthly meetings took place. This was all crucial to continue the application process. Community town hall meetings also took place to gather resident feedback, which the coalition valued and used resident input when designing the project. This included integrating local council member in office to join part of the planning process alongside city entities. It helped that our lead partner, which is Pacoima Beautiful, was housed out of the local council members building. Strong community engagement and activism on the part of the local CBO with deep roots in Pacoima area was crucial to the success of the application process. I'd also like to share that we had the opportunity to hire a subcontractor who was amazing, who supported us during the application process. What has made Green Together successful is that we took our time to foster relationships with lead partners, leverage partners, and community members. We take the advice of the community very seriously and integrate it when planning or when discussing changes. We meet monthly, allow for opportunities to discuss project status updates and areas for collaboration. As a grantee, we are available and approachable. We make sure to help one another and discuss strategies for current challenges. We commit to what is said in order to continue to gain the trust of all our stakeholders, which we value. My advice for you as future applicants, I'll copy the Nike slogan, just do it. It's worth the commitment. Take your time when selecting partners, strategize on the role each partner will take and their commitment to the workload. Work together with a shared vision. The fruit of your work is the opportunity to improve the quality of lives of residents. There's nothing more rewarding. I'm done, Jerry.
Great, Jasmine. I was just letting that soak a little bit. That was great. Thank you so much, Jasmine. Appreciate that. Oh, wow. All right. Well, with that and with that energy, we will break out into breakout rooms here. Just want to let folks know how we're going to do this. So we'll have 2 breakout rooms, and one will host the folks at Watts Rising, and then breakout room number 2 will host Jasmine and Pacoima Green Together Collaborative. So you're welcome to, you actually will have the ability to virtually move from one room to the other. So feel free to move around. We also want to let you know that the main room, there will be SGC staff if there are further questions. So yeah, feel free to move around in these rooms. Again, you'll have the opportunity to ask more detailed questions about projects and experiences, as we talked about. The other thing I saw in here, which is a great question, will there be an opportunity at the end of the session to network with potential partners in our area? This is great. So our breakout sessions will last till 12 o'clock. And you're welcome to stay on. SGC staff will be here until 12:30, so we'll stay for another 30 minutes. It'll be kind of an open discussion. Really, we don't have anything else to present. So you can use, I guess, the virtual space to connect during that time. You can also use it to ask any questions that you may have for SGC at that time. But yeah, feel free to use this space if this is a good way to connect with folks in your area, then let's take advantage of that.
One quick suggestion, Jerry, if like
Sure.
folks would like to connect with people that are in a similar jurisdiction, it would be helpful if folks renamed yourself. So if you hover over your own video, rename yourself to indicate what jurisdiction you're in. It'll be easier for your fellow folks to identify you.
Great suggestion, Bo. Thank you. All right. Are we ready? So then we will go into breakout rooms at some point.
Which one is Watts and which one is Pacoima?
Yes. So Watts you'll be room
Okay.
number 1, and then Pacoima will be room number 2.
Okay. Thank you.
So to enter the breakout sessions, you're not going to be sort of pushed into them. At the bottom of your screen or however your Zoom is organized, you should be able to open up the breakout rooms button and you'll self-select join. And you can use that at any time to return to the main room or jump into one of the other rooms. And
excuse me, host, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, if I'm calling in, there's no way for me to get into a breakout room?
That's a good
Is that correct?
question. Let's.
I wonder, is there a way to manually place them, Sarah?
It looks like it.
Let me look into this. One moment.
If possible, can you put me into room 1 for Watts Rising?
We'll work on that.
Okay, and I'll be joining room 2.
Okay, I think that person was just sent to room 1.
Sorry, I don't know how to get to either room. Can you tell me again how to do that?
Yes, so at the bottom of your screen or wherever the sort of Zoom menu options are, there should be a button that says Breakout Rooms. And then if you click that, it should pull up the 2 different rooms and you can just click Join Room for.
Got it. Okay,
one.
thank you.
Thanks.
I'm assuming if we don't want to go to any rooms, we just stay here with the main room.
Yeah, that'll work. And some of us from the SGC team, and I believe Brian also from Department of Conservation will stay in this room if there's any other kind of more general questions and discussion. Or you can just have a break and hang out.
So I've got a question for the SGC folks. I was looking at the Transformative Climate Communities Technical Assistance Survey, and it says the lead applicant organization type. You have California Native American tribes at the very top of the list. Is that any indication of your selection process? Are Native American tribes, California Native American tribes, really a high priority for this application?
I think we do have a priority that we're trying to reach a diverse range of communities. There's no special criteria or special selection points or incentives associated with any particular applicant type. The collaborative stakeholder structure and the transformative plans get scored based off of the strength of the partnerships and the diversity of applicants and how they represent the views and the needs of the community. But and so we welcome California Native American tribes, definitely. We think, every place in California has Native people, but you're not going to get special points, and it's not that a lead applicant would be placed above a different group because of it.
And my second question, if you don't mind me asking a second one, is it was mentioned in the overview that the implementation grantees actually were planning grantees. Is that a necessary step to get to an implementation grantee status, if you will? Do you have to you go through the planning grant process first and then next year go for the implementation? Is that a step process?
You don't. The programs feed off each other because the planning grants are independent and they're really an opportunity to do planning capacity building, but it's in the spirit of the program. So our planning grantees do multiple projects. They work on community vision and community partnerships and securing leverage projects. And so we found that because of the relationship between the two types of grants, often planning grantees have been well positioned to follow up with an implementation grant in the later round, but it's definitely not required. And in the rounds 1 and 2, that was not the case, in part because some of the planning grants have not been completed.
Right.
But if you have a suite of projects, right, and you can meet the criteria, you're more than welcome to apply.
Will, and sorry, third question, this is SGC focused, is if the applicant has received another type of SGC grant in the past, does that exclude them from applying to this program? I'm just curious if there's, that barrier or hurdle.
No, not at all.
Okay, great.
Where are you from, Todd?
I'm from the East Coast, but I'm working with Native American tribes in California. We did participate in the Native American planning process with in the last year. We're just finishing up right now.
Oh, great.
And so we're hoping to take that to the next level with possibly this implementation grant process.
Great. Which community were you working with?
We were working with the Tule River Indian tribe and just outside of Porterville. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah. And I don't know, Porterville's a current planning grantee.
They are, yeah. That was my question too. Another question I was having is, there's obviously, we've done a lot of stakeholder engagement and we've engaged the city of Porterville too as well. If they were to become a participant or a partner, would that exclude the applicant from, or would that be discouraged because Porterville was an applicant for, or a grantee in the past?
It's a bit specific. I mean, I might encourage you to reach out to us and we could have a conversation. But definitely Porterville is not excluded from applying for an implementation grant. And if you, or if folks were going to partner with them on an implementation grant application, that wouldn't be discouraged. We like to see diverse partnerships across jurisdictions.
Yeah. Well, we have more than them. There's a lot of people been involved in this effort. So I think, but I think their involvement is key to what the tribe is actually trying to do there. So.
Thanks. Does anyone else in here have a question for us? I see one. From Mehdi, of the total implementation grants executed, Management submitted as a follow-up to the planning grant. So far we've only had, 3 of our 8 implementation grants were former planning grantees in round 3. And this wasn't the case in rounds 1 and 2 because also our planning grants hadn't been completed yet. And then we haven't had funding for the last couple of years. And so we haven't had the follow-up for that yet. So I don't know that we have like good data, like on the percentage that will result in successful implementation based on planning, but yeah, so we'll see which ones will come for a planning or an implementation grant this year. Does that answer your question, maybe?
Currently, I think he said, right, it's 3 of 8 today.
I have another question. I was a little, maybe I wasn't following as keenly as I should about the pro-housing discussion on the application today. Is that something completely separate or is that integrated into this TCC? I was kind of confused on their role.
You want me to take that? They're separate. They're another state program housed at the Housing and Community Development Agency. And what happened was when they, I guess, executed their regulation, they included a few housing related programs in their regulation, including TCC. So requiring our program to include the pro-housing designation policy incentive. So we're required to include it.
Okay.
The way, yeah, so it's like a state coordination effort just to make sure that they are getting
like
that across. But
it's like a reverse, it's like a reverse application. They're saying that this program can benefit their program. Is that what sort of the message was?
I think that is the intention, and then I think hopefully it also benefits ours, but hopefully there's a mutual benefit too for our jurisdictions. But so tribal territories are not subject to this policy incentive or the requirement, so they will get those full 5 points because the pro-housing program recognizes they really only contemplated cities and counties in that program.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Just for clarification, you need one government agency to sign on to these applications. And if that is the case, does the Groundwater Sustainability Agency qualify?
Sorry, which agency?
A Groundwater Sustainability Agency, a GSA.
So the requirement is that there be a public agency who is signed on as a co-applicant, and I would probably direct you toward the guidelines where we define that formally because I don't want to misspeak. I know that like community service districts, resource conservation districts, and certain types of other like resource specific agencies are allowed. I don't know enough about GSAs to know if they would fit that definition, but it's a good question and we can figure out the answer and get back to you.
Thank you for the clarification on the wording too. I guess another question of mine is our organization was part of a Strategic Growth Council project several years ago, and it was two CSDs that were leading the way between our community and a neighboring community. We got really far along in the project before the neighboring community had decided they just didn't want to do it anymore. And so I'm wondering if that will have an impact on us applying again.
I'm not familiar with the situation. Was this with the Matheny Tract and Tulare Planning Grant?
No, this was between Allensworth and Alpaugh in Southwest Tulare County.
Okay, and this wasn't a TCC grant?
It was a Strategic Growth Council grant. I'm not sure if it was a TCC grant. It was for water infrastructure.
I see. I mean, we don't have that information. We'll assess the proposals that will come to us, and I think like as long as you all can demonstrate that what you're proposing is feasible and the partners are committed at this time, then that's what we'll look at when assessing. But we don't have that. Yeah, we don't have that kind of background information from the other programs.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, I wondered if I could ask a question of staff. The program, yeah. Okay, great. I'm Nancy Falstick. I'm in Watsonville, Central Coast with Regeneración. I'm in the PACE program, so I've been working with Strategic Growth Council folks and just love this program, And my understanding is that a first-time applicant would definitely start with the planning grant. Sounds like maybe that was different in the past, but to not bypass the planning grant and go right to an implementation grant. That was my first question. Just wanted to confirm.
No, you do not need a planning grant to apply for the implementation grant.
Okay.
Sort of candidly, what we found is because TCC is so complicated and because there's so many components, often folks are not, unless they've been preparing for a while or they have a fair amount of work in place.
I don't think we're ready for the implementation, but related to that, as news about this program is going out, different people around the area sort of hearing about it, and they're like, oh, this is the source for this program that I've already been developing in my mind. And to me, that's not the spirit of this program. It's start with the planning process that really involves the community and starts with that vision, and then kind of out of that, you figure out what are the specific elements. And so I'm just trying to learn better how to talk to people here locally about it. If there's a project somebody's been dreaming up independently, it's not like, oh, here's the funding source for that project, because it needs to be community driven. Can you say any more about just how to think about that and how to talk with other people in the area?
That's interesting. This is sort of off the cuff. I think you're right that we look for that community drive and community focus. And that doesn't mean that the community doesn't already have projects that they know exist. And so I think a mix is pretty reasonable. We've had a couple of situations where folks have said, we're deep into a process that we've already been engaged in. Or we'll have a city that says we have an ongoing project and we're really motivated to move it forward. And so they have some of the readiness requirements and other things kind of lined up because they already know what they want to do. And that wouldn't preclude them from participating in TCC, but they would have to demonstrate pretty deeply how their project is being integrated with community vision. We did tell someone who came to us with a project that they had already planned, that we wanted to see where the community input was in it in the previous round, right? And then it wasn't really an appropriate use of funds to kind of just take the plan you already had and run with it rather than going and integrating community feedback. So that's a way we've seen it kind of go back and forth. But I don't, I think communities often know what they need. And if you're lucky enough to have a project or a community partner in place who wants to pursue that and is willing to kind of double down on the community vision, I think that could be an asset.
Thank you.
There are two questions in the chat, Brian and Sophie. I'm not sure if you want to answer those from Jack and Jesus.
I saw those. Sophie, do you have any initial thoughts? I'm trying to think about how to approach this. So Jack, I think the answer is yes, right? Planning it for us includes capacity building and networking and relationships. None of our previous planning grantees have have not done some of what you're talking about, right? Identify initiative programs, help develop those answers. And some of those you can go find. The East Oakland neighborhood, what is it called? East Oakland Neighborhood Initiative, for example, has a publicly available report where they go into quite a lot of depth about what their planning process looked like and how they did that. I think that could be a good example for what a pretty successful planning project looks like for us. I think we do want a component in there that it probably should not just stop at like identifying initiatives or programs that could support things. It should probably be looking at what kind of projects could be implemented in the community. And they don't have to be TCC projects, right? The planning grant is standalone. So if you wanted to look for opportunities and use those funds to spend time on grant writing and developing, you know, applications to related programs that were going to improve community and climate resilience in your neighborhoods, I think we would be on board. Sophie, do you have any adds there?
The only thing I would add is I would say like some of the more successful planning grants we've seen in the past are ones where it is used to support the city's efforts, but it's also used to support those community groups and neighborhood groups and stakeholders to participate. And so like, you know, through allocating funding to enable them to participate in the planning process and do the partnership building and visioning. So that's, yeah, the other part I would add. And then 50% leverage is not required for planning, just for implementation.
Yeah, I've got another question related to that. The cost share contribution, did you say it's 50% cost share?
Yeah, 50% leverage. And I would say, because you mentioned that you're looking at tribal communities, and we know this comes up in tribal communities, I would talk to our TA providers and talk to us and look at the grant application, because our leverage requirements are a lot more flexible than a lot of other entities, a lot of other programs. It's really focused on just confirming that there's a sustained investment, but it includes other grants from federal sources, from local sources.
Yeah, that was my follow-up question, is that is there any entities excluded from cost share, like other state, federal funding sources?
No. We also include in-kind.
Yes, I was going to ask that too as well.
Yep. So in previous projects, for example, we've had somebody who had like CBOs with volunteer organizations, and we worked with them to develop like what their effective hours of in-kind contribution was. And I think something like the community, where that is probably going to be a big component of the way they approach the work, that would be something we would work with them on, and our TA providers would work with them on to characterize.
Are there any funds that you can't use as leverage funds, and that you can think of, you know?
I don't think so.
Good.
Sophie.
Good.
We'd have to check.
We have ineligible activities under certain strategies. And I'm trying to think through this. So for example, with our affordable housing and equitable community strategy, the project doesn't support parking lots or additional like roadway expansions that increase traffic and density. That sort of increases VMTs and is not really in keeping with it. So if you were to like propose that your leverage project would do something that didn't line up with the activity but was an investment, I think that would be something we'd have to dig into.
Yeah, the parameters around leverage are primarily that, like Brian mentioned, that it aligns with the overall TCC program objectives and the vision of the and that they're like supporting and bolstering your efforts that will be funded through TCC. And then there's just some other like logistical things, like it has to be funds that are going to the project area. So to make sure there are funds that are benefiting that community, and that it's spent, like the timeline needs to align with the grant timeline.
Right. Dare I say that the leveraged funds are greater than 50%? Is there bonus score or bonus points if you bring more money than the cost share? If you follow me on that,
Yeah, in the past we've altered that language, I think, because some have told us that the leverage was actually a big like lift. But then it turned out that a lot of applicants brought more. I think though it's sort of like assessed qualitatively, not quantitatively, you know,
Okay.
more in terms of like under the scoring criteria around the readiness for transformation for that area and the potential that this investment could bring, right? So it's showing that it would have this like these like multiple impacts. So that's what I would say about that, but it's not like
yeah. And I would just say, like, as you work through an application, or if you're submitting an application, we do in the guidelines when you would submit, for example, a standalone leverage project, it also is committing that project to be integrated into kind of the TCC process and the TCC mode of doing work. And so we've had to navigate situations where people have said, right, that they have all this additional investment that they're prepared to offer, but then it really was not just standalone, but kind of unrelated to TCC. And so I think it can be an opportunity to sort of include more, but also it's pretty important to understand that if you're making that part of your project application, that it's something of a commitment to the vision and to supporting the community vision. Jesus, I don't want to ignore your question, and you've been here, so I did want to try to roll around back to it. I'm not sure I have the best answer. I think the short answer is yes. That's really in keeping with TCC to do renewable energy, and especially like an integrated renewable energy project, like a community microgrid that has multiple benefits and those social services and elements. A lot of TCC projects do have a focus on housing, but that's not a requirement. I think if your project was just renewable energy and like renewable, that might be a challenge. And we kind of need to dig into it or see what the application or the proposal looked like to try to assess it. But certainly for the implementation grant, that's really requires multiple kind of dimensions of the work. With a planning grant, if there's a good proposal and it's going to integrate kind of multiple benefits and a community focus, I think it's pretty in keeping with the requirements. That sound right to you, Sophie?
Yeah.
And if you have a specific project in mind or something that you're working on or looking to work on, and you want to reach out to us at TCC at SGC, or submit the survey, and you can talk to our TA providers as well.
A question for you about the technical assistance for the grantees. If they are assigned, do they start working right away and advising the applicants? First of all, is it competitive? I'm assuming that if you had 100 applicants, you probably couldn't serve them all. But how does that process work when you fill out the survey, after you fill out the survey?
I can take this one. So after you fill out the survey, the TA team will go through an intake process where they'll review what you've submitted and see who would be the appropriate person to work with you, or the appropriate organizations. Yes, it's true that if 100 people applied, we would not be able to provide the same level of technical assistance that we're hoping to, but we have believe we've structured the contract in a way that we will be able to serve out the number that we're expecting or hoping to get. So please, yes, and it would start happening quickly after the survey is submitted, in line with what the applicant is able to do. But yeah, the TA process will start as soon as that survey is submitted.
Thank you. Thank you. You've been very helpful. Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're past noon. I don't know if Jerry's back with us yet to close us out. But the TCC team was planning to stay online and provide an opportunity to answer some additional questions to anybody who's in the breakout room and has kind of programmatic questions around 4 questions. We'll be here for at least, I think, 30 minutes.
I have a question
Mm-hmm.
Regarding the strategies. So cool pavements are in strategy 4, but if that was incorporated with an active transportation project, would you still want to see it in strategy 4, or is it better to have it in strategy 1? I mean, strategy 3, sorry, 3.1.
This is, yeah, this is our long-standing problem with encouraging integrated projects while having separate categories. I
mean, you can think about it. I just wanted to put it out there because it's something that we're considering.
My offhand, so I believe if we were to look at strategy 3, like the actual street improvements are pretty explicitly, an allowable cost, and the specific project types we list are not meant to be exhaustive. So I think if you have a strategy and then a project type that is not ineligible, that's being integrated in and it's quantifiable, I think we would probably tackle that as part of the same project, just to keep things clean. Somebody else might really want it to call it a separate project if they had like a different applicant. I'm not quite sure, but I think you're right that like if it's really an integrated transportation project and they want to do this, I'm pretty sure we can do that.
I think the biggest barrier is more around the greenhouse gas quantification. So if it's quantifiable, I think it's harder to mix those two because of the calculators. But other elements I think can be integrated.
Okay, I mean, obviously we can go through this with the TA advisor too. Thank you.
Marta, I see you raising your hand.
Yeah, I have a kind of a awkward question to ask. Recently, and just know that this comes from a place of wanting to do the best for community and also to avoid unintended consequences. Some research has come out from Arizona and UCLA stating that cool pavement painting actually increases heat radiation during the daytime, and it re-radiates it towards like pedestrians and buildings. So I'm just wondering if that's being taken into consideration as we invest in the future to address the highest priority community needs. I know the heat maps show that the radiation goes down, especially at nighttime, but it's because it's being re-radiated to the local area. That's what the research states. And I kind of just wanted to make sure that I say that because we've invested in climate solutions in the past that have had unintended consequences, not by design, but by, lack of information and research. And I just wanted to point that out before we go too far down that path without realizing what the research is actually saying. And I could put that research in here if you guys want.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, thank you for that. So we do try to keep up with the research and reevaluate all of the elements that we are funding annually. And I think I don't know when this came out, but I think this wasn't part of our latest round of updates. And so yeah, we'll look into it. I think fortunately we haven't had too many of these projects happen yet. But yeah.
All right, Arizona did one too, so they're not alone. I don't know if they're going to have more coming out. You know how sometimes when something is funded, it continues to get researched. So thanks. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for flagging that.
Sharon, did you?
Yeah, I had 2 questions. So it seems like a lot of people did have, grant help in developing these applications. And it appears that, you know, organizations either had staff or they hired additional consultants to help them. But then you mentioned this CBO, you know, local TA. So could you clarify a bit more about what those local, must it be a CBO? You said that they can't be part of the group or the co-applicants, but what role can they really play? Can they help with writing the application? Can they do all of that? And also, do you have a sense of what kind of budget they might have? Because if you're asking another organization to help, clearly, you know, they may want to contribute, but otherwise they might be a co-applicant, but otherwise, you know, what kind of funding might be available for them?
So as far as the eligibility, they would need to be a nonprofit organization. So most likely a 501, any 501c3 designation, I believe, but I think 501c3 is the most common.
Mm-hmm.
And then as far as, you know, their role on the application, it would be, you know, certainly helping to write portions of the application is one potential role, helping to facilitate, provide outreach, and provide, you know, communications around developing the applicant team and, you know, developing that governance structure would be another potential role. But again, it would have to be someone who is not on the applicant team themselves. And I'll leave it to SGC staff if there's anything else I missed there.
And do you have a timeline as well? Because obviously, you know, folks would want to get them on board as soon as possible. So how do you see that process working?
I think we're still working through that timeline right now. So after the surveys are submitted, then we'll have a timeline for bringing those local TA providers on board. But yeah, we don't have that set at the moment.
Okay. And then the other thing is, could you clarify the 51% and the 49% in terms of like physical layout of a project area? There are lots of census tracts that can make up things. Obviously, it has to be contiguous, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a square, right? It's based on actual census tracts. And then it's basically the square footage of those census tracts and how they fit into the picture, whether they're, you know, a heavily, you know, 25% or they're low income in the 49%. Can you just talk a little bit about how to measure that?
I'd say one thing is that, just to clarify, it doesn't have to be the entirety of a census tract. It can be any shape you want. We've had some wacky looking shapes as long as it's contiguous. And it is based on area, so square feet or square miles, whatever unit you want to use. At least, you know, 51% means slightly more than half has to fit the one set of criteria, and then the remaining half or less has to meet those same criteria or be a low income community. So you can really draw any shape that fits your neighborhood context, and then whatever those census tracts are designated as will determine whether it meets the requirements. But you definitely don't have to use a census tract as a basis for designing a project area.
Okay.
Did that clear it up, or do you have any remaining questions on that?
It's, you know, I've been looking at the TCC mapping tool, and it's a little bit hard to figure out how to figure that out. So
I would recommend starting with where the project area that you want that's within 5 square miles, and then you can work with you, the TA providers can work with you to figure out if it meets those requirements or how it could be adjusted slightly to meet those requirements. And they'll definitely provide support with all of that mapping as well.
If you end up with any census tracts, I mean, I think most of them are low income. In the language, it says overlaps. So if you overlap a census tract, and so some of them end up being in the 25% or worse, and some are low income, but they don't fall in it they would still, you don't have to have them all be contiguous for the 51% or the 49%. It's taken as an entirety, basically.
Yes, the whole project area needs to be contiguous, but then within that, you
Okay.
just have to get to the 51% and the 49%.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Sharon, I realized that I didn't address the potential budget for a local TA provider as well. And that is still to be determined. It really depends a lot on the number of applications that we receive, or more specifically, the number of TA requests that we receive over the next couple of weeks and beyond. But in our budget, it's likely to be around $2,000 to $5,000 per this round, maybe up to $10,000. It really depends again on the number of applicants. So it's hard to give a definitive number, but somewhere in that ballpark.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful because, you know, everybody has different rates and different expectations. So no, that's useful. Thank you.
So we still have quite a bit of people on. Were there other questions or comments, concerns? We'll have some time if there is anything, but otherwise, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Holly.
Just one other question. Are the breakout groups, were they recorded as well, or just the main session?
They were not recorded.
Okay.
We do have notes on questions that were asked, and so our hope is that if there was maybe, you know, kind of frequently asked questions or things that seem significant that we might be able to publish following this, we'll do our best to do that. But we haven't looked at them yet. I certainly haven't.
I was just gonna say, about when will the recording be available? Because I want to be able to share this with some of the folks on our team.
Hopefully early next week. It just depends on when our web team can get it processed and put up on YouTube, but it'll be on our YouTube channel with a link on our website.
Perfect, thanks.
And then Jack Wong, your question, it's a maximum project size. So there's no minimum. If your community isn't close to 5 square miles, that's totally fine.
And I'll also add that there's you can have an interjurisdictional project. So if you have a county and a city, and your city qualifies under the criteria, and then there's qualifying unincorporated area around it that's, you know, significant as part of the community, like you're definitely able to integrate that.
Yeah, and I would just add for context, the 5 square miles is, yeah, it's the maximum, and it's also often like larger, I think, than we've seen is really the scale of the neighborhood, you know, just depending on the context. So that's why we have that number. And then, yes, we will have around 4, 5, and 6 were funded for the next 3 years. And our TA providers will also be providing, so in contrast to the past, and not just direct technical assistance, but also some capacity building in between application phases to support some of the work, which is a great benefit of this multi-year contract.
Does anyone have any other questions? There's still some time and we're happy to talk. Do we have a timeline, Sophie, for rounds 5 and 6?
We're hoping to be on the same schedule.
Okay.
Annual schedule.
And Jack, yes, we would be aiming for March for funding availability and then a summer decision. Summer application closure decision in fall.
I just wanted to ask, in your experience over the past 3 rounds, do you see that there's a benefit to a smaller or more medium-sized project area? I mean, something like Watts, which was around 2 square miles, was better than some other one that maybe is 3 or 4. Anything that you've noticed?
Not necessarily the size, but the project distribution across that project area. I think we've seen sometimes the project areas are larger, and maybe there's some areas it seems like there aren't projects there. So just as long as it makes sense, right? I think that's really the key.
Mm-hmm. Very good, thank you.
We do have a few project types, for example, like home solar installation or home energy retrofits, where some of our previous rounds have, especially with COVID, had trouble finding sufficient uptake. And so a smaller project area might be challenged depending on what they were hoping to accomplish if they can't, get enough project area residents to participate in certain types of programs. So you just need to make sure it's relevant and kind of scaled to your neighborhood.
I was just wondering, the people that are awarded the planning grants, do they typically then apply for the implementation grants? And then if so, like in the past few rounds, have the majority of people that have been awarded the implementation grants, had they previously done planning grants?
That was the case in round 3 specifically, where it ended up being that prior planning grantees received all 3 awards in that time period. It's not overall true for the program. It's certainly not a requirement. And then I think something we try to reiterate is the planning grants are standalone. So there's a natural relationship between them. And we found a lot of people apply to planning grants to develop a proposal for 2 years later. But we're not opposed to planning grants that aren't focused on that are working on projects and have priorities that aren't TCC implementation. It's not a barrier. Does that help?
Yeah, that answers my question. Thanks.
Yeah, and actually for some reason, all of the round 3 applicants to implementation grants were former planning grantees. So they were all equally competitive, I guess, from that standpoint.
But Green Together hadn't had a planning grant, but they had been a previous implementation grant. So they applied in round 1, didn't get the funds, and then round 2 applied for implementation and got it.
That's a really good point too. A lot of our former implementation grantees, that there's often in round 2, both Green Together and Sacramento were previous implementation grant applicants, and that process I think helped set them up for another round of applying.
And did you find that the planning grants, did they only include the area from their planning grant, or did they tend to also expand a little bit, having learned, about some of their neighbors, et cetera?
It was a combination. Some actually got smaller because the planning grants don't have that 5 square mile requirement. So sometimes they were more focused, like in Oakland. And I think maybe that was also the same case in Stockton. So not necessarily. And, the project area doesn't have to be the same as the planning grants. But yeah, because of what you're saying, if they find information that makes it more appropriate to include other areas. Mm-hmm.
These are all good questions, also things I think it's helpful for us.
I'm going through some of these questions in the chat, but if there's one that hasn't been answered, you can either go off mic or just resend it, and we can try to address it here as well.
I'd like to also ask about the data collection and indicator tracking. I know that there's a third party assigned to an applicant who is awarded the grant, but there's also a need to have within the project team some tracking, either as individual co-applicants or from the lead. Might you talk about the support that's needed by the team versus what the third party provider provides?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So in round one, they were assigned to UCLA, and then actually in rounds 2 and beyond, we have the applicants, the awarded grantees, select a qualified provider to open up the bench of technical assistance providers that can help our grantees. And so they have to go through a qualification process, which is actually something as a new component that we did add. And we also added this clarification in this round of the guidelines for what that TA provider, those qualifications they need to have. So yeah, they will be, doing the bulk of the data collection and processing and setting up that framework and writing the reports. And they, it is their job to help the grantees and the partners with that and developing a plan that is feasible for them for that regular data collection. And so the grantees and partners will be required to do annual data reporting to that TA provider, and also to participate in other kinds of focus groups or surveys or interviews for developing some of the other story related portions of the evaluation, like annual case studies. So it's really that, I think, yeah, something we also tried to clarify in this round of the guidelines too, is that the grantees and partners have allocated enough time to engaging in those activities. And we have provided a suggested budget amount. We say 2% of the total, just to ensure that there's sufficient, funding towards that administration and reporting aspect.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go off camera because we've got a couple minutes left here, but we'll still be here. I'll let everybody else hold down the fort visually.
Any last questions in the next 5 minutes or so?
People are heading off to lunch.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Riley, for joining us. And Darren, I saw you in the chat from Rising Sun. It's nice to see partners. I think we might see you next week down in Stockton.
Yeah, we're definitely going to try to make the meet and greet. Hope to see you.
Awesome.
Okay, well, if there are no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. I'll leave it open for maybe just one more minute for any last thoughts. Okay, well, thank you all for attending, and please reach out if you have any further questions that weren't addressed or that come up in the coming weeks. tcc@sgc.ca.gov has been put in the chat. Really have appreciated all of your questions and